Collaborative divorce or collaborative practice is something that was created by an attorney in Minnesota several years ago and has kind of evolved. I believe it's been in Texas since around the 80s, is more prominent in the cities, but it is a wonderful way, in my opinion, for families to try to figure out how to dissolve one way of being and create two separate entities in which kids are going back and forth. The unique thing about collaborative law is that the attorneys are hired specifically to conduct the case in the collaborative process. And there's statutes and there are things that you file, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but it is an accepted practice by the Supreme Court. The unique feature is that the attorneys will represent their clients in the negotiation process, but if the negotiation breaks down and they don't reach a final settlement, they cannot represent them in a litigated matter. So it's kind of like all your eggs are in one basket and you're using all of your efforts to resolve the case and settle it. In most other cases, you kind of have one foot in the settlement box and one foot in the litigation preparation because you don't know which way it's going to end up. In collaborative, you're all in about trying to resolve it. The collaborative process works like a team, so your attorney and my attorney are helping us try to come to some solution. It is individualized based on the couple's values. So at one of the first meetings, you talk about what's important to you. Where do you want to be at the end of this process? How do you want to get there? For me to propose a solution, then I've got to also take into account how that's going to affect the other side. It's a little different for people. It seems kind of unusual, but it is, you can come up with some really creative, wonderful, it's hard to say wonderful about a divorce, but wonderful ways to kind of reinvent how you're going to operate as a family. Where kids are concerned, it is crucial that parents, however this ends, leave themselves in a position where they can communicate with each other about the child and how they're going to co-parent. Because for the rest of that child's life, you have to deal with that other person. And if you've been through a knockdown, drag-out child custody fight, you will hate that person more than you hated them at the beginning, because the way the laws are set up in our country are absolutely a win-lose. And in order for you to win, you have to tear down the other side. And in order for them to win, they have to tear down you. So imagine sitting there and watching your former neighbors, your former in-laws, everybody that you've known say every horrible thing you ever did out of context. And then you do the same thing with your spouse. And then the court says, okay, here's how I'm deciding on this, and y'all go in peace and work together on raising this child or children. And it just doesn't happen, and it's hard for people to imagine how devastating that situation can be. I started my practice as a family counselor, a marriage and family counselor in an alternative school for troubled kids, in which the parents had to agree to be in counseling. And I can't tell you how many families said to me, why didn't my lawyer tell me it would be this bad? I never would have done this. It was absolutely not worth the extra money, the extra whatever, for all this aggravation, because we can't communicate, we can't get along, we can't do that. And so if parents are trying to find another way to not screw up their kids and to resolve the issues that have to be resolved, but also leave a pathway for them to be able to work together when that cute 10-year-old becomes a not so cute 13-year-old, and not raise a juvenile delinquent. I mean, it's so important that whatever choice parents make is one that allows them to cooperate with each other for the sake of the child, because otherwise a lot of bad things can happen. So collaborative, I think, of all the settlement negotiations, has the most promise to do that, because in addition to the folks I talked about, you also can have a mental health person as part of the team, and or a financial advisor. And those folks, the mental health person isn't doing therapy. It's not about all people getting divorced are crazy, although my mental health friends would have some adjustment disorder diagnoses for a lot of folks going through that process. But it's about helping people communicate with each other. And the financial person is to try to help people figure out how to value things, because you can imagine the person who wants to stay in the house wants it to have the lowest value, and the person wanting to sell it thinks it has the highest value. And how do you fairly come up with that? How do you split things in a way that leaves everybody whole? I mean,
a different version of whole.
A different version of whole, exactly. In order to do a collaborative divorce, you've got to hire somebody who's been collaboratively trained. And there are websites that advertise their membership. And unlike mediation, there's a Texas version, and there's a national version. And so if you Google it, you can find lists of folks who have been collaboratively trained who can guide you through that process.